Hello and welcome to another LioranBoard 2 button tutorial video. Today we'll be creating a def counter button that not only gets activated upon chat commands to update the defs, but also stores the counters to a local file that can then be expanded upon for multiple different counts. We're focusing today on defs, but this could also include things like fails, wins, achievements, Pokemon caught, basically anything that you want to keep account for in a game. Button itself has 4 chat commands that can activate it. One to recall the number of deaths in the game, one to increase it by 1, one to decrease it by 1, and one to set it to a specified value. Before we create the actual button, we first need to create the file that the button reads from. And to do that, I've already created this create game counts CSV file button. Inside it is just a CSV create command, which creates a CSV called game_count and puts the first column name as game_name. The next command is a CSV add columns command, which takes the CSV game_counts and adds a column called deaths with a default value of 0. If you wanted to add other columns such as wins or Pokemon or whatever count, you'd put the column name in and then set the default value as whatever you want it to be. Next, we do a save of the CSV file that takes the CSV game_counts and saves it to the main directory global variable game_counts.csv, and then it deletes the CSV from the buffer inside LioranBoard's memory. It does not delete the actual file. If you wanted to delete the actual file, there is a file delete command here where you'd put the file path in. To show you what I mean by the main directory global variable, if you open your variable window and click global variable, you can see here the main underscore directory, and that includes the file path with the final slash at the end. That's why there doesn't need to be another slash here. If you wanted to put it inside a folder, you'd put the folder name here, and then you'd put the slash, and that will save it to a folder inside the main LioranBoard folder. We're not going to do that, so I'm just going to click cancel, save, and then just to show you, I will bring up my file explorer, and you can see that I have no file here called game_counts.csv. We'll now switch to the Stream Deck, where I'll press the create game_count.csv, and if we go back to the file explorer, we can now see that the game_count.csv has been created. Now that our file has been created, we can start on the actual button. To do that, go into your deck and create a button by either double clicking an empty space or right click create button. The first thing we're going to do with the button is we're going to create its triggers. So right click, edit triggers. I said there were 4 chat commands for this button, but thankfully we can do it with just 2 triggers, both of them being a Twitch chat trigger. We'll create those 2 now. The first one we're going to do is the one that just responds with how many deaths you currently have in the game, and this one anybody can use. So for that, the message is !deaths. The second one will be the one that only mods can do, or if you wanted it to be just yourself, just click this broadcaster here. And for this one, it's almost exactly the same, !deaths. We're also going to add a wildcard to it. Wildcard can be anything. In this instance, we're either going to have it be a plus, a minus, or a number. Now that we've created our triggers, we can click save and we can get into the actual commands. Either double click or right click edit commands, and that brings you to this window. This button can get quite complicated to follow, so I've created a flowchart that should help explain what we're doing at each step. This flowchart, as well as the code for both buttons, will be available in the GitHub link in the video description. The first part of this button is just gathering data. The first bit of data that we're going to collect, we need a trigger pull data command for, because we're going to be getting the name of the channel that the command was used in. You don't have to use this if you're going to hard code your channel name into your own button, but since I'm showing this, this is what I'm going to do. For the variable, we're going to call it channel. The next thing we want to do is we want to get the name of the game that we're currently playing on stream. To do this, we can ask Twitch for that information, presuming you set up the information correctly in your stream title and category. To do that, we're going to go for a Twitch get stream info command. This will only work on streams that are currently live. The channel name, if you're hard coding your channel name in, you'd put your name in here. Since I'm using the variable channel, I can put that in here. We're going to save this stream info under the variable name info. This can take a short while to come through. We're probably talking less than a second, but we do need to wait until the variable exists before we can continue. The variable name we're looking for is info, and we'll give the timeout after 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. If you find that the info isn't being pulled in time, increase this timeout. Now that we've got the name of the game that we're playing, we can pull our currently counted def into the button. To do that, we first need to load the CSV. That's CSV Load. The CSV name is game_counts, and the file path is the global variable .main_directory game_counts.csv. Obviously, if you've put this inside a subfolder, you need to put the subfolder in between the variable and the file name. Now that we've loaded the CSV into LioranBoard's memory, we need to look to see if the game name already exists as a row. To do that, we need to look inside the first column for the game name. To do that, we'll do a CSV column find value. The CSV name is game_counts, and the column name is the string game_name. What we're looking for is the game name, which is stored inside the variable info.game_name, and we'll save this variable as check because we're checking to see if the game name is a row inside the file. If it is inside the file, great, we can move on to the next step. If not, we need to add the game as a row in the file. To do this, we'll create an if statement that says if the check equals -1, that means that the CSV column find value command did not find it in the file. We then need to add a row. So CSV Add Row, CSV name is game_counts, and the first box value is the name of the game, which again, info.GameName variable. This will also set the default value of defs to be equal to 0. Now that we know that the row exists, whether because we've just added it in or because it already existed, we can then do a CSV Get Box command, which allows us to get the value stored in the intersection of the column defs and the row game name. For that, the CSV name is game_counts. The column name we're looking under is the string defs. The row name is the variable info.game_name. And we'll save this variable as game defs, as it's the value of the number of defs we have for this game. The last bit of information that we need to gather was whether or not there was a wildcard. For that, we're going to pull the wildcard. We're going to store whatever was in it inside the variable wildcard, and the wildcard number is 0 because it starts counting at 0, not 1. To check to see if the wildcard contains anything, we'll do an if statement, and we'll say if wildcard is not blank. That means that the wildcard variable exists, and then we'll move on from there. What we're going to do next is we're going to remove spaces from inside the wildcard. So to do that, we're going to do a string replace all command. We're going to look inside the variable wildcard, and we're going to replace all spaces with nothing. That will remove all the spaces from inside the string. We're then going to save it back inside the wildcard variable. The next thing we do depends on what's inside the wildcard variable, and because there are 3 options, we're going to do a switch statement. Could do an if statement, but a switch statement is both faster and easier to read. So start with switch statement. Switch statement says look at this variable and compare it to possible cases. The variable we're looking at is wildcard, and we want to look at 3 cases. We want a case where the wildcard contained a plus. We want a case where the wildcard contained a minus, and we want a case where the wildcard contained letters and or numbers. Because there's no way of saying letters and or numbers, we're going to stick a default case in. So that means if it's not a plus and it's not a minus, it will use this 3rd case. If the wildcard contained a plus, that means we want to add 1 to game defs. For that, we'll do a set local variable. The variable name is game defs. The operation we need to do is plus equals and the value of 1. We're doing almost the exact same thing for if it's a minus. So I'm just going to copy and paste this command in. But instead of adding 1, we're subtracting 1. Finally, the last case we're looking at is if it's not plus or minus, so it contains letters and or numbers. First, we want to remove all the letters, so we're just left with numbers. So for that, we need to do a string digits only command. The string we're looking at is inside the variable wildcard, and we're going to store the numbers back in the wildcard variable. If the wildcard only contained letters, that means that now it contains nothing, which means we need to say, hey, look, there's a problem here. To do that, we'll use an if statement, and we'll say if wildcard equals an empty string, please send the chat message that says error, no numbers found. We want this chat message to go to our channel. So you could put your channel name in there, or you can use the variable channel. We now want to exit the button, but first we need to make it ready for the next time the command is used. To do that, we first need to delete the CSV from the memory. For that, it's game_counts. And we also want to delete the variable info. This is so the next time the button is triggered, this wait until info exists command will actually wait for new data to appear. With both of those deletes done, we can now safely exit the button. That exit if blank equals blank. However, if wildcard did contain numbers, we now need to set the game defs to be that number. So set local variable game defs equals wildcard. And that's the last thing we need to do inside this third case statement, which is the last thing we need to do inside the switch statement. I'm going to minimize it for now so that it's easier to read the rest of the button commands. I'll open it up again at the end when we do a final run through. After the switch statement, we now want to save the CSV. That's CSV Save. The CSV name is game_counts. And the file path is the same as the one up here. So I'm going to copy it and paste it. The next thing we want to do is output the new number of defs, but that's also the same as what we want to do if there was no wildcard. So outside of this if statement, we'll add a chat message. And for this, we'll say number of defs for, and then the game name, which is stored in info.game_name. Grab that because it's a variable. And then to call the number of defs, it's the variable game defs. Finally, we want to put that to our channel. You can either put your own name in or do the channel variable. Lastly, we need to do a little bit of cleanup. So the first thing we're going to do is the CSV delete, and that will delete game counts from LioranBoard's memory. The next thing we want to do is to delete the variable info, just as we did before the exit. And finally, the last thing we want to do is add a cooldown to this command, because you don't want 2 or 3 people to trigger it at once. For that, it's called an overtime command in LioranBoard, and that just means that this button can't be triggered for another however long you specify. It's in milliseconds, so we're going to put it as 10,000 for 10 seconds. And that's it. And that's the button done. Click save again. Like I said earlier, the get stream info command only works on a live channel. I'm not currently live, so I can't show it working. But if I were live, putting !defs would give you the number of defs currently for the game. Putting !defs plus would add 1, !defs minus would subtract 1, and !defs and a number would set the defs to that number. Doing my final run through of the button now. So we grab the channel name and we store it in the variable channel. We then use that variable to get the stream info and store it inside info. We wait for info to exist, and once it does, we can load the CSV of game counts from the file path inside the main LioranBoard folder. We then look to see if we already have a def counter for this game. So we do a column find value inside game counts file. Under the first column game name, we're looking for info.gamename as a variable. We'll save this result under the variable check. If check equals -1, that means it did not find the game inside the file. So we need to add the game as a new row. Now that we know it exists, we can get the number of defs by doing a CSV Get Box, looking in the defs column and the row, the game name, and storing that number in game def. If it's a brand new row, it should default to 0. If it's not, it should tell you how many defs you had previously. The last bit of information we pull is the wildcard, and this is to have a look to see if we're just outputting how many defs we currently have or if we're amending that number. In this if statement, if wildcard does not equal something, we're going to be doing these bits. Otherwise, we're just going to be putting out the chat message number of defs for game name is game defs in our channel. We're then doing a bit of cleanup by deleting the CSV and the variable info. And then we're adding this overtime command to add a cooldown of 10 seconds to the chat command. If wildcard did contain something, first we're removing the spaces from it so it's easier to manipulate. And then depending on what's inside wildcard, we have different things that we're doing. If wildcard is just a plus symbol, we're adding 1 to game defs. If it's just a minus symbol, we're subtracting 1 from game defs. If it was anything else, we're going to take the digits of wildcard and put them back inside the wildcard variable. If that variable is now empty, we're going to say there were no numbers found, delete the CSV from the memory, we're going to delete the info variable, and then we're just going to exit the button. Otherwise, we're going to set the game defs equal to the number inside the variable wildcard. We're then going to save the CSV to the file so that we can use it later or on a different stream. Again, we'll then output the number of defs for that game chat. We'll then do the cleanup of deleting the CSV from the memory, deleting the info variable, and then adding the cooldown. Hopefully that works for you. If you have any questions or any problems, leave a comment down below and I'll try and get back to you. Otherwise, you can join the LioranBoard Discord, which will be linked in the video description, and you can ask in there. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.